Welcome everyone to Discoverability and User Engagement in Academic LibGuides. My research operated under the umbrella of three questions. The first, how are university or academic libraries handling discovery of and user engagement of LibGuides content? The second, what is the proper way to label and locate LibGuides content in a way that students understand and interact with? And the final, to what extent do Stony Brook University students engage with LibGuides on the SBU Library's website, and how might this be applied to other universities? Due to the statistical nature of my research really um, revolves around systematic data such as Google Analytics and the LibGuides insights, stuff like that. It wasn't necessary to get too crazy about selecting the user pool or the population that I took from. That being said, for my in-person survey, I got a little more specific with that, and I was able to talk to mostly graduate students, actually 100% graduate students, who were mostly over the age of 25. A couple definitions before I continue. First off, discoverability. How discoverable is the LibGuides system to the users that are using the website? So what sort of links are they using, buttons, locations, so on and so forth. And then you have user engagement and page depth, which kind of go together. And user engagement is the length of time that a user spends exploring and researching within the LibGuides content management system. Now, the page depth is the amount of pages that a user looks at during one of these sessions. So keeping those in mind, we'll move forward. I felt the need to do a literature review. Maybe it's the English major in me. Maybe it was underlying need to actually establish where the research in our field stood with LibGuides. Needless to say, in 2014, Amanda Skull wrote an article about including students in the process of actually creating the LibGuides, and she found that students reacted to LibGuides and searched them out more often once they became involved with actually creating them. So that was a really interesting article. In 2015, and this article is probably the closest to what I'm doing, there was a much larger research, a much larger scope covered in this article by, you can see, multiple authors, Gessner, Chandler, Wilcox, and they published Are You Reaching Your Audience? The Intersection Between LibGuide Authors and LibGuide Users. Basically, you're looking at what LibGuide authors are designing, what are they creating, and like what are they looking for as far as user engagement goes, and then on the flip side, what are the users themselves actually using LibGuides for? What are they looking for? So that was a much more larger, and they turned up a lot of good stuff. Probably the top thing is, maybe the most obvious thing is that you should really put your important stuff on the home page of a LibGuide, the very first leftmost tab of the LibGuide. But my research takes that a little bit further. It should be noted that in 2016, Tabitha Farney published Optimizing Google Analytics for LibGuides. Basically, this article is about search engine optimization. It was about setting up Google Analytics within the construct of the LibGuides CMS. So it goes much further than just simply setting Google Analytics and forgetting it. It's about, like, basically having Google Analytics at the LibGuide, the subject guide level. So I used Google Analytics to set up some parameters for my research. The first point here is about page depth. It's about how many pages are users looking at per session, and we can see here it's less than 2 pages. So they're not doing a whole lot of surfing. And you can see that the user engagement, the actual length of time that they're looking per session, is 1:33. So again, so this is the sort of window that we're thinking of, and this is the sort of window of opportunity that I research, that I'm looking at how other libraries are handling it, and perhaps getting some input from student users as well. Thusly armed with my armor of knowledge provided by the literature review, and my sword of parameters provided by Google Analytics, I was able to strike out into the internet, and I grabbed up like 10 different libraries, 10 different academic libraries, and I started breaking down the elements of their website. And a few things popped out forefront to me, but some things were a little murkier, such as what do institutions call LibGuides? Like what are LibGuides appearing as? Just because you have a LibGuides content management system doesn't mean you need to say, hey, look, visit our LibGuides. So many institutions say, visit our research guides. Some say LibGuides. Some say library guides. You know, they like to spell it out a little bit. It's a guide to your library. Some say subject guides. And study guides was a name that I just kind of threw in there. Like, it seemed natural to me. And we're going to go a little bit more into depth with that. Some of the libraries, or most of the libraries, are providing multiple pathways to access LibGuide content. So you're not going to have just one link on the front page. I believe only 1 out of 10 of the libraries I looked at had like a single link and no other alternative way to get to it. There are also, academic libraries are also using buttons with icons, or they're ripping a page right out of the 90s, and they're putting icons out there with like magnifying glasses or question marks, or some other indicators of hey, look, come click over here, come check this out. And also the libraries they play little games with linking the LibGuides to their search bar in some way, like whether it's they have a tab along with the search bar, like here you could search our website, or you could search our LibGuides, or they have like a link to LibGuides underneath the search bar. And one library that I remember actually had a link to LibGuides above the search bar, so your eye had to pass by it before you got to the search bar, which is generally accepted as like that's the place that most students are going for. They're going for that search bar. And some libraries combat the page depth problem by allowing users to do all the navigation they need on the very front page. Like there's one library I went to, I visited, and when you clicked on the research guides, it loaded everything right there on the front screen. Everything stayed the same. It's almost like the old frames of the, again, like sort of like the 90s. It's almost like going back a little bit. So the interesting thing that I'd like you to kind of check out here is that you can see the web addresses, the libguides dot something short.edu, or like the libguides dot schoolname.edu. Currently the default sort of setting for LibGuides is that it's guides dot library dot name schoolname.edu. So it's much more larger, a little bit more haphazard, and we can see that most universities have sort of moved past that. And you can see also how I sort of like broke down like what each university is doing. Like, are they using a button? Are they using a text link? Do they have alternative routes to reach the LibGuides? What is the face name of the LibGuides? So on and so forth. Here are the names that are used by the institutions. So you see research guides has like the largest chunk of the pie. Subject guides coming in right behind that. No one's using study guides. LibGuides, of course, and then library guides. So you can see that there's a little bit of a disparity here. Like, there's no consensus, surely. Now we can compare this with the users that I surveyed. These are the graduate users, most of them over 25 years old, highly motivated researchers. This is what they prefer, and you can see some similarities between the pie graph. Um, for example, you can see that research guides kind of reigns supreme here. But then if you notice that, once study guides is added to the mix, that actually takes away from subject guides. So that's like an even split of 11.1% each. Um, so it's just something to notice, something to keep in mind, moving forward, that there's no general consensus what to call them. You can play the averages here and put like a combination on your front page. Um, we'll revisit that in a second. Two of the libraries that I analyzed used two different names at the top of level of their website. This is Northwestern. You can see under the quick links, you can see research guides. You could also see in that middle column, research tools and guides. But wait, that's not all. We're going to click again here, and you can see this is much further down the page. So this is like after the noise of the initial, like what you see. This is further down. You have this big graphic and a lot of activity, and then you have find subject guides. So there you have it. You have research guides, and a little bit further down, subject guides. It brings you to the same place. So it's the recommendation of this study, my research, that academic libraries diversify how we refer to our LibGuides. So put links in a few different spots, name them a few different things, test your local population, see what they think it should be called. Basically what I did was I put a screenshot of an actual LibGuide, and I asked them, I was like, hey, what do you guys think we should call this? So once users access a LibGuide, obviously you have the home page, which is the default page. That's where you have most of your views. That's where you want to put your important information. But what I wanted to search was kind of make a sort of poor man's heat map. I wanted to see where are people clicking, which tabs are they viewing. And so I took these LibGuides and I sort of broke them down into like this ultra cool, high tech sort of model here. That you can see how I broke it down. That menu I just translated into like a simple table here, and then above that table, you can see I have my views listed on the right hand side. Like, so that's the amount of visits that each tab got under the period of time that I looked. And so you can see above it, though, you can see M, M2, L, L2. Now, basically, that's me coding the results into M for most viewed, M2 for the second most viewed, L for the least viewed, and L2 for the least most viewed. And so that's going to come into play. This here was just a sort of like extra thing that I did. I figured I would just like, put, just sort of organize the content itself instead of just the statistics. But these are like the labels of all the tabs of each one. So this was just sort of a little add-on, but it gave me an idea of like the sort of information that people are prioritizing versus people just really not viewing. This is information that could be used in future research for sure. So some findings up to this point of my research. So the tab next to the home, in other words, the tab that's abutting the home option, that's the most viewed page outside of home 44.4% of the time, which is a fairly high rate when you consider that many LibGuides have like 10 or more tabs, even though it's generally considered it's general practice to 6 to 7 to 8 tabs is probably the best practice to have according to the literature that I read. If you widen that up to M and M2, most viewed and second most viewed, That ups it up to 66.7% of the time. So you can see that. The menu button to the very far right of the menu has a 0% rate of being the most popular. So again, I sampled 20 random study guides off of this library website, and 0 of them had the most popular tab on the furthest top right button. So 38.9% of the least popular tabs were found there. And going back to the button next to the home page, only 16.7% of the time was that button the least popular. It rarely happened. The furthest menu option to the right is the least or second most popular, so that's L or L2, 50% of the time. So 1 out of 2 times, the furthest option to the right is one of the bottom 2 viewed tabs. So you do not want to put important information on the right side of your menu. So something that was a little bit of an add-on from like that sort of add-on from the last slide. In 83.3% of LibGuides analyzed, that included a tab on citations, plagiarism, copyright, style, plagiarism, all that. Oh, sorry, I got a little mess up there. Apologize. But pretty much anything that was like pedantic in that way, that was not subject related, but more style related, or plagiarism, stuff that you really just don't want to hear about, or at least I guess students don't want to hear about, because 83.3% of the LibGuides that had that sort of information was the least popular information, was on the least popular tab. Something to keep in mind. So I wanted to add some context with the survey. I wanted to get some live lab rats, and I succeeded. I think I sampled about like 17 or 18 graduate students, most of which are over 25 years old. They consider themselves, heavy, good, like they do a lot of research. I often see them in the library, so I know they're not lying. They're definitely in there researching. These are engaged students. 72.2% prefer libguides.school.edu over guides.library.school.edu. 80% of non-LIS, because I did have 2 fellow library students participate at one point, but I redacted their answers on questions such as, do you know about LibGuides, stuff that like they would be biased, that would prejudice the research. I cut them out. But 80%, including here, I cut them out. So 80% of the non-LIS participants did not know about the LibGuides resource. So that's a problem. Information interaction, it doesn't matter if people don't know to look for the information on your website. They don't know what systems you have, what resources you have. So that's a pretty a fairly big problem that I uncovered. At least maybe it's just local for me, but it's something to keep in mind for everyone. So I asked the people who were surveyed. I asked them what would be the best way to inform them, and you can see that in class is still the champion, but not by much. I was a little bit surprised that social media was the 3rd ranking here. I thought that maybe that would be approaching higher levels, but I guess people don't want to be bothered in their social sphere with academic knowledge. But you can see here that an email newsletter sort of thing was highly favored as well. So writing up a newsletter or having a blurb from your library included in an email newsletter may be an effective way of sort of getting the message across, along with like in class, like an in-class liaison, meeting students, talking to them, letting them know what's going on. And you can see that physical signage over the library, 9.5%, which I believe came to like 2 or 3 people only. You can see that that's not really much of not much. It's not much demand right now. You can maybe put one somewhere for those people, but I have a feeling that from the three other methods, that if you have a healthy sort of marketing outreach presence through newsletters, in class, and social media, you can see that you pretty much cover everyone. That you probably would hit those people who prefer physical signage as well. Another question that I presented to the graduates that I surveyed was, what type of link would you like to click? And basically what I did was I gave screenshots and I asked them, which one do you want to interact with? You can see there's a diverse range of responses. It's food for thought. A square icon with a magnifying glass and research guides written on it on the bottom that garnered 33%, 33.3% of the responses. The second most chosen link is a text link that had research guides on it. Just research guides, nice, clear, big font, 27.8%. A text link, library guides, along with the small descriptor that basically said something along the lines of resources used to study or something like that. That earned a 16.7% response rate. I actually thought that might have been higher, but the data is what it is. It'd be something to test further for sure. And then also a research guides text link with a pull down menu under it earned a 22.2% share, which is noteworthy because some people actually mistook the pull down menu for a search bar, and they're like, oh, I like search bars. Like, one of them even said it to me, and I sort of kept it to myself that this wasn't a search bar. But hey, look, it worked for quite a few people. You can see it's the third most, and there was one that did not get any responses, and it was basically text over an image that had bad contrast, and it just didn't really show up well at all. So that's the sort of trip through my research, the sort of stuff that I've come up with. Um, Perhaps the best stuff that I came up with is ideas for further research. We could expand the survey into more institutions. That would be great, to really, qualify it over um, diverse populations. More research can be done on the kind of information students choose to interact with on LibGuides. Going back to that point that I had about they don't want to see stuff about citations. They don't want to see stuff about style. If anything, that should be its own LibGuide. So that way, if people want to look at stuff about plagiarism, citations, style, whatever, they can go to that LibGuide where they expect to find it. They do not want to see plagiarism or anything like that under Scandinavian studies. Not going to happen. Um, Further research can be had concerning the key terms and phrases that they use to discover, to search, access LibGuides. It'd be interesting to test the sort by all guides approach versus the sort by subject option. I saw that one library was really impressive to me. It just cut one full step of the process of getting from point A to point C. It just cuts B out, and I thought that was really interesting. And also, I would like to test out providing entry points through social media. I run a social media account at work, and I like sending out sort of links to library resources and such. And I would like to perhaps do a further study in that regard. So thank you, everyone. I know that this ran a little bit long. I apologize, but thanks for sticking it through. And it's been a great semester, and I've admired a lot of your work. All right, so thanks. These are my works cited, just a couple. I'd suggest looking them up, giving them a read. And till next time, take care.